You'll
Yes.
you'll comment as we go.
Thank you. You got the AC control?
No, I don't have it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is published in the local papers and also posted in the lobby of this building. We are being broadcast live on Channel 34 and streamed live on montclair.peg.tv. This evening's proceedings may involve applications and resolutions that we'll have discussions on. Please note that the planning board may be conducting hearings, may be examining individuals, may be asking questions, all of which are necessary and part of the process in order to take official action under the municipal land use law. We would hope that and expect that our audience will treat us with due respect and conduct themselves as they would in a court of law, as we are, in fact, operating in a quasi-judicial capacity. First up on our agenda this evening is our roll call.
Chair Nguyen,
Here.
Vice Chair Brodock,
Here.
Mr. Schwartz,
Here.
Mr. Cook is excused, Councilor Schlager,
Here.
Miss Willis,
Here.
Mr. Rooney,
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally is excused, Miss Lockman,
Here.
Mr. Barr,
Here.
Mr. Gilmer.
Here.
Okay.
We have minutes from our April 8th meeting.
Motion to approve with Mr. Braddock's modifications.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Approved? Abstained? Okay.
We have our resolution on Lackawanna Plaza.
I will recuse myself for this one. I'll be back.
We've gotten a number of edits over the past few weeks. I think that there's still a couple of open issues that we'd like to clarify and settle. Martin, I'll let you begin.
Page 9, number C. Mr. Nab concludes that the limited parking on the site is a major issue and the smaller store would be more successful. Mr. Nab also determined that side parking could or would be appropriate.
And Mr. Schwartz, just when you mention page numbers, is that on the...
It's on the May 6th version.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I believe that, and that's also page 9 on the May 7th
It is? Okay.
revision also.
Yeah, we just got one that's on YouTube.
This after, but it says,
Which
it's
tomorrow?
actually, it's version 7, but it says May 6th on it.
Okay,
It's-
draft of May
It's draft 7.
So I'd like to add that he said that the smaller store would be more successful, concluded limited parking on the site would be a major issue and the smaller store would be more successful. Mr. Naba also determined that side parking could be beneficial, or some comment like that. And I
What do you mean by side parking?
Parking on the side,
I don't know which
on
side.
on the side of the building could be beneficial. On the side of a building,
So which number are you reading on
Number-
page 9?
number C.
Is it 17C?
17C.
Okay, so currently, but that's not the current version.
Here's one of the things too, in the resolution, it's really not, they're not minutes. And so sometimes, is this essential to, is that advance the plan? Does it support the approval of the plan?
Well, you are, later on, I want to deal with this because we come to a hardship about parking on page 19B, where we say it's a hardship because there's no parking on GLENRIDGE Avenue. and 3 frontages. Well, that's not really correct. That was it's a conscious choice by the developer not to put parking there, and I think that should be stated.
But I think that was the testimony of their planner.
You're talking, you said again on
That's
page 19?
summarizing the planner's
Yeah,
testimony.
in other words, if we're going to, if we're going,
Well,
It's not your conclusion, that's what the planner testified to.
right, the portion of the meeting that the minutes rather, that you're referring to are the portions of the minutes that summarize the testimony that was received on the various evenings of the minutes from the people who testified.
yeah, I don't see Mr. Knapp.
Resolution, yes.
Mr. Knapp testified that parking on other.
What page again?
Back to 17, C on page 9.
Right.
Mr. Knapp testified that that parking.
You're reading C?
I'm dealing with C, I'm not reading C. Right now, it says limited parking on the site is a major issue and that smaller store will be more successful. What I'm saying is that Mr. Knapp directly testified that parking in additional areas could work, and that's not reflected in here. Since you're putting in findings of fact, that's a finding of fact that he made.
No, this isn't a finding of fact. This is a recitation of his testimony, okay?
Yeah, that was changed.
Which is a difference.
That was changed, yeah.
Which is a difference.
It was formerly called a finding of fact, but you took out that fact.
You know
It
what,
wasn't-
I've done it that way my whole
Yeah.
career, and I think you had a good point, so I'm going to change all my resolutions.
Yeah.
But again,
Let's remove the finding.
it wasn't a finding of fact in terms of, here's what the board found as fact based on all of the evidence. It was a introductory, it was a preamble, introductory word that said, here's, as a finding of fact, this is what took place. And you're right, it could be confusing, so he removed it.
Okay.
But that was the way that the whole document was structured. So, you wanted an additional, you wanted this removed, or you wanted an additional entry indicating
An additional
that there
entry-
was additional parking?
That Mr. Knapp believed that side parking for a store could work. That side parking for a supermarket could work, and that's what he testified to.
What are the rest of you guys?
I'm not sure what you mean by side.
And the parking on the side of the building
It's-
or another side of the building, that not just front parking would work.
So
But
you're saying
he's-
testimony.
there are
but-
spaces that we're not using, is that what you're saying?
Well,
There's space that could be parking that we're not
Let's
using?
reverse engineer this. The developer has determined that they wanted all their parking in the front. That's their, let me finish. That's their right. The board went along with that, but that's a choice. That's a choice that they've made. That's a choice that some members of the board went along with.
Right, but I don't think that this section is dealing with that at all. What he says, what's written here is that Knapp concluded that limited parking on the site is a major issue and that a smaller store would be more successful. And above that, it says that McNabb owns a company that designs and builds grocery stores, and he provided examples of successful independent retailers around the United States. The fact of the matter is that the limited parking for the site is an issue here, based on what they might have put.
I'm not trying to take that line out. I'm just trying to add
But-
in one more line.
But side parking, it's kind of like a,
It doesn't, it's not, the
It's
way
left
you
field.
say
He's
it
not
better,
skilled
that's all.
to make that statement. He's a store operation guy.
No, he is qualified to make that. He designed supermarkets.
I'm not questioning whether he's qualified to make it, I just don't know exactly what should be said.
Okay, so what I'm trying to show here, because we're...
all right, well, in order to shortcut this, can I suggest, can we go back to Mr. Knapp's testimony? And this is going to take some follow-up, to pull out exactly what he said about side parking, and we can put it,
That's fine. Some comment about parking on the,
as long as it's a quote of what he said,
fine.
then he said it, I don't have a problem with it. But-
Yeah, that's fine, I still
And
know
if
what
it
to say,
satisfies
yeah.
you that it's there,
Absolutely.
I don't understand, but
Well, you know, and
Let's
as
put it there.
a judge's opinion, you do have to put the facts that you find, but at some point, some facts are going
But
to
this
be
isn't-
the stronger facts.
Right, but this isn't,
Okay, so here's.
this is something that, it's just something that he said as a factual matter, that's what we're
Well,
reciting here.
I have no problem adding this to move the ball, just to keep us on track and move the ball without going back to check the transcript. I don't think this will sink our battleship.
Right, so let's put the quote in here.
So for full
and-
transparency, this is the comment that he made and the dispute over whether there could be parking in another place and how the site should be developed. So he made a different comment, and on page 19, letter B, which I want to come to next, you've got a hardship exists on the site because it has 3 frontages. The chair has explained that that is indeed a fact. And no parking is able to be in the Glenridge Avenue frontage. That I want to edit out because that's not the case.
You
That's
said 19B?
19B. I'm sorry.
I think it's
I'm
38B.
sorry. Page 19, all these numbers are killing me here. Page 19, letter B at the top.
But you're
Page-
changing the testimony
It's
of the
it's
planner.
38B.
Page, it's 38B.
Item 38.
On page 19.
Correct.
Okay. And this is reciting, again,
Okay,
it's
reciting.
something totally different.
Yeah, yeah.
It's reciting what the planner stated, so
Okay,
it's not
so
related to that
that's-
other statement.
That's fine, we're gonna leave that in because that's what he said.
That's what he
Right.
said.
But where we come to the conclusion of that.
Okay, where are we going now?
I think that's number 50, hold on, H on page 24. To see how.
We're still,
Yeah, okay,
I'm there.
I got it. H on page 24, it's still a finding of fact, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, now, let's see where, at some point it comes
I think
to
it's number 57.
57, where the board finds. Yeah, where is it?
But I think that's true.
Right.
That has to do with the
that's
front yard.
true.
Yeah, with the
That has to do
front
with the
yard
front
parking.
yard
Hold
It
on.
has to do with front yard
Hold
parking.
on.
parking.
Where am I?
We extended that other language that you're concerned about.
Hold on. It's very hard to track this up, as you can see.
Martin, I think you're on page 23,
Not
H,
enough.
2 little i's. Do you see where I'm
Final
talking?
is H on page 24. Got it. I wrote my own note to try and track it. Okay.
H, so is that 50H?
H is on
There we
23.
go.
H1.
So at the top of page 24.
I can extend that if you want. Mr. Chairman.
Hold on. Page 23. H. No, it's still.
That's still true.
Because it
still-
doesn't matter.
Still. That's from them.
No,
No,
that's
it's
a
the
board
board.
finding a fact, and it's true.
Where's the board finding?
If you go
That's the
back,
section.
I think everything's starting with H.
Back to
Or,
page
sorry,
21.
50.
50.
Item 50.
You're starting with
Item
50,
50.
it's
Now I'm
all
doing
boards
it.
finding the fact.
Yeah.
Findings of fact. Okay, the board concluded. Got it.
no.
I don't have a problem with the parking plan. 40 spaces. Okay, here's my point. That it is not a hardship because there can be no parking on Glenridge Avenue.
It doesn't say that. It's, what it says is that a hardship exists on the site because it has 3 frontages,
That's fine.
and no parking is able to be in the Glenridge Avenue frontage, which makes it impossible to have parking, not to have parking in the front yard,
Which is true.
which is true.
But it is possible to have parking in the Glenridge frontage under a different...
But it would still be in the
I-
front yard,
Well, I disagree.
because it's on a street. Any yard that abuts a street is technically a front yard, am I right?
You're correct.
Yeah.
Okay, now I
It
understand
has to
how
do with the
you
front
read it.
yard set
And,
parking
and that would
variance.
be a hardship other places
Okay.
also.
I mean, that could have had a deck there. They could have decided
It would
to-
still be
Yeah,
front
front
yard
yard.
parking.
That's what, okay. So you're referring to the front yard aspect of this that is the hardship.
Yes.
Not parking on the streets.
Got it.
Has
Okay.
nothing to do with parking on the street.
Okay. Page 60, 62. Number 62, page 25. Let's see if it's still page 22. There are no substantial negative impacts arising from the proposal. Not so. The negative impact is taking down a historic...
It's
portions
the
of-
majority of the board's,
Right, and you didn't vote for this, you didn't agree, but the people who did vote for it feel that this is accurate.
We didn't, I don't think we voted that there were no substantial negative impacts.
Well, that was the planner's testimony. So by agreeing to vote on this, the other members of the board did agree that there's no
there
hardship.
will be negative impacts. The question is, will they be so substantial that you vote no?
Right,
And the
and
answer
that's
was
what
no. So
answer-
that's the
yeah.
proper
Asked and
legal
answered.
term of art.
Yeah.
That will not unreasonably impinge upon light, air, privacy of the surrounding property owners.
Okay?
Anything else?
Page 27, finding of law. 1 second, please. Not a hardship at this site. Let's see.
One of them was taken out.
So again, my point, and correct me, Counselor, if I'm wrong, as a finding of law,
Yeah.
Which
I-
number?
I was starting to say before, earlier, I thought you were talking about a different resolution. It is a hardship. It is a classic hardship that they have 3 frontages
Under the municipal land use
under the
law,
municipal land use law.
which is different from your Webster definition of hardship.
Right. It also doesn't mean that they would necessarily have to get approval on that, because you got to balance out the positives and the negatives anyway,
Right.
even though it's a...
It's a consideration.
In this case, the board found that the benefits outweigh the detriments.
but the choice here was to add apartments. That was a choice that they made. Therefore,
No, but you're going for what you were thinking about, or at least I thought you were thinking about, is a self-created hardship. And by the way they designed the plans, you're asking that question.
Yes.
In this instance, this is merely talking about the parking lot on the one side of the property that has the frontage issue because it has 3 streets, and therefore it is correct.
okay,
But I understand, we're going to find a case where someone's got a pre-existing hardship, but this one isn't it. Self-created.
self-created hardship. I just
Right.
want to be clear that we're not setting the table
No.
for the assertion of hardship in that way.
No. That would play the same way every town, every place. We have 3 streets.
Front yard parking.
Okay. Just one more clarification. There is one fast food restaurant, because we had some line in there that the applicants proposed to add a fast food restaurant, and that's in the 1,800 square foot space. But there already are fast food restaurants, so is it, we're adding a new one, or we're adding an additional one?
There's only...
Mr. Chowder, you want to help me
There's
on
no,
that?
there's
only
no
the big-
active fast food restaurants.
This
That will
was
be
the-
in
I-
property.
I can answer that. There's one. There's just one.
Popeye. There's Popeyes now.
Well,
Popeyes is
no, what it's
going
going to be,
away.
Going
but we
away.
want it one
Building's
fast
gonna
serve,
Popeyes
you call
is
it
right now
on
in
your
the parking
ordinance.
lot.
I think
It'll be
what
only
they,
I
one.
said the building's...
But I
I
think-
was chicken to touch that question.
That's good.
But wait a minute, so, just to clarify, there could be Popeye, that space could be a fast food restaurant,
No,
Oh, it's...
or no? Are
it's
you-
going away.
Well,
Physical
gotta be in the
place where it
parking
is
lot.
today is going away.
yes, but this
The
is...
new location could be a quick server with
But
your
wait a
ordinance
minute,
calls
so-
fast food.
So there's Popeye exists today, and then there's this 1,800 square feet that's going to be a fast food restaurant. So
But
is
there'll
that,
only be the latter,
there'll only be the one 1,800 square feet
Right.
as a fast food
except
restaurant?
for the rest,
Because
as a
where
fast
Po-
food,
Yes.
Where
yes.
Popeyes is
Yeah.
today, the parking lot is going to
Gotcha.
take that space.
Yep, I understand that,
And
I
then
just-
the supermarket is the rest of the space.
Yeah, I think that it says that in the whereases, opening whereas, it says that.
Okay, let's go to the, before we get into the most recent proposed details by the applicant's attorney, on page 30, the exterior details.
Which number are you on, Mr. Schwartz?
Well, that's,
Page 30, I think number 24.
Thank you.
Okay, we did not really finalize the exterior finishes on the residential side. And I think we need, and we've got a line in there that prevents the use of metal panels, and yet we've got metal showing up on
24,
the,
top of 31.
I think on a parapet, there's,
Mr. Troutner, you got to answer this one, too.
this has not been fully clarified. Rather than tie this up now, I think we should make a clear-cut statement that the exterior finishes will be finalized through the planning board's revisions committee. It's somewhat there already, but I think it needs to be made stronger because the details have not been fully vetted. So there are some panel areas, there metal panels.
The discussion I had with Mr. Troutner was that Mr. Stevie did show the materials on the plans.
That's right.
So actually, and if I may, I think there may be a way to provide what Mr. Schwartz is asking for, which I think is condition number 24, which
Yes.
currently reads all materials will be reviewed. Maybe that could be amended to say all materials, including exterior finishes, are to be reviewed. And then the separate issue is what Mr. Galvin was just referring to, which is actually condition number 20. And really concerns also condition number 19. There was an amendment proposed with condition number 20. Originally, it read the architecture and facade materials will be completed exactly as testified to by Mr. Stevie. That part's fine. But then a sentence was added to say, furthermore, no metal or hardy panels shall be used for any new construction facade as coverings on residential buildings or commercial areas or as transitions to existing structures. I spoke to Mr. Galvin about that because the plans that had been submitted did reflect hardy panels and metal. And there had been some discussion about this, and I believe it was at the March Planning Board hearing. And as a result of that discussion, there was an agreement to a condition which is actually accurately reflected in here as condition 19, which was we agreed not to use battens or other types of seaming materials, and that they have to be reviewed by the Planning Board's revisions committees. And then incidentally, the hardy panel only in the rear of the residential building. But that being said, I think if 19 stays, 20 stays up to the word furthermore, and then delete the rest. And then on 24, it'd be revised to say all materials, including exterior finishing materials.
No, I want to leave that in there and add. I want to leave it in the furthermore in, and then add in another line unless a waiver provided by the revisions committee. Do the reverse. In other words, right now it's prohibited. You're trying to put it back in. I don't want to tie this up over these finishes right now, but yet.
What? So I think we're okay doing it the other way. I have a concern about doing it the way you just suggested, because that suggests that the board affirmatively disapproved the use of the hardy materials, which it didn't. The board did condition the use of the hardy materials on not utilizing battens as part of the seaming, and to use another type of seaming material, and that was supposed to ultimately be worked out with the revisions committee as to what was proposed. But so we're okay addressing it, I guess, in the.
I don't remember the use of hardy panels at that time. I think but.
Steve, wasn't the conversation about how hardy panels could be used?
Right.
So that we didn't want it to look
Right.
like hardy panels have been used prior in the town, and that was because of the battens and the way that it was joined and seamed, and that there are other options for that so that it doesn't look like hardy panels. And as long as they're in the rear sections, that they're not on the main areas, that we thought we could manage that, right?
I think so.
You still agree?
I don't think we've got that.
The thing is, It's always a problem about what is front and what is rear when it's such a large
Especially if you've
building.
got 3 frontages.
Yeah.
You know,
If I could just add, it's actually on our renderings, and it's only in the rear facing east around our courtyard, so you can't see it from Glenridge, you can't see it from Bloomfield, and you can't see it from Grove.
The courtyard on the residential
Back
building?
of the
Residential
residential and the
building
private
around
area. And you asked,
area.
particularly Steve asked for not to use battens as were used at Valley and Bloom. And we agreed to a, I forget what it's called, but it's a flush seaming
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, I really don't want to approve that here by
was approved.
paper.
Well, so in terms of the seaming material, I don't disagree, but what I'm concerned about putting in here is I don't want to write in here that the use of
If the
hardy
only
panel-
place where it's used is in the courtyard, where it's not visible from the street.
These things look like junk, okay? They've been looking like junk around town, and there's no excuse for it, all right? We need to come up with a better solution and build better. And
Respectfully, we included it, I'm sorry, I have to disagree.
I
We
opposed it
included
then.
it. Okay, but
I
you
opposed
didn't even vote on the resolution, but the point is that we only included it in the courtyard. We're using this other flush seamed approach. These materials are used all over.
And the way that it,
They're
and the
used
way
all
that
over,
it
and people are
ends.
going crazy telling us that the town looks ugly with them, sir. That's a fact.
This is what's on our plans.
That's great, so.
All right, so,
We think it
so
looks good.
here's
It's
the
going to
thing.
come before the revision
What
committee.
I think is as long as we need to confirm, again, because I believe what you're saying is correct, but again, over the year plus that we've been considering this, it's hard for me to specifically remember this fine point, but if this material is only going to be located in the courtyard and it's not going to be visible from the public street, then I think we can manage the way that it looks. And so if that's what the plans reflect,
But, sorry. Furthermore, no metal or hardy panels shall be used for any new construction facade visible by the public.
The metal panels are shown in limited areas because it was part of the design.
will it be visible by the public?
The metal panels.
The metal panels?
Yes.
Where are the metal panels?
We would agree to say only as shown on the exhibit that you have, because we wouldn't expand.
Where were you using the metal panels?
It's up on
All over on
the top
Or was
floor.
a detail over the door or something, I don't remember exactly. It was very much of a
I
detail.
opposed it then.
It's on the
I
top
thought we
floor
had
on the
agreed we
front.
weren't going to use them. Again, if we can get into where it might work as small detailed elements later that are, as detail with pressed molding.
Okay, so so that we can try and resolve this evening, I think Carmel is looking for the portion of the plans that depicts it. So let's take a look at it, because I think there were some places on the building where metal was appropriate. Because we've got other metal in terms of the stanchions that are visible, that are outside. And if this is,
It's a whole different metal.
Yeah, it's a different, that's.
It's like
Well,
a Valley and Bloom panel.
I don't know that. And I don't-
Allegedly, it's
I
called out
There
on
are
the-
none at Valley and
recollection.
Bloom. There are none.
Allegedly, it's called out as tags
about
on the
panels.
elevation sheets, but that's, I saw you
Cement
remember.
panels, they look terrible.
They're called what on the,
So there was testimony when it was
It's on the
talking about the
elevation.
hardy plank and the metal panels, and then Mr. Stevie testified that he was talking about some of the metal panels working better with different brick colors, and he said those are all called out in tags on the elevation sheet. So I saw that she was looking at the elevation, so I was just trying to indicate I don't know where the tags are exactly. But.
Yeah,
In other words, it's visible.
the rear elevation is where you're saying it is, the hardy planks and the aluminum
There may be some on bay windows too.
There was a
Underneath.
bay window section there.
Right.
That was what originally brought it up. We agreed we weren't going to use it there.
Yes?
It doesn't work. It looks ugly.
where is, now, metal
Hardy plank siding.
aluminum cladding, windows, metal canopies.
Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, I see metal canopies and aluminum around the windows.
All of that.
Like recessed.
Seems pretty visible to me.
That's the metal panel. What is what? Looks like it's brick.
Well, that's big, but I'm talking about like
Oh, that one.
these above, below the window.
But that's visible.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be.
If you see that.
That's gonna be,
Yeah.
It's still visible. It's still visible.
Well, let's see what's around the corner.
No. Gotta speak up on the record, too.
Yeah, it looks pretty visible.
And I can see, there are tags on the Bloomfield Avenue elevation for
Yeah, we're
decorative metal bay window? Okay. And it looks like there's also a decorative metal cornice.
Okay. Now, these are bay windows.
You see them out there, sometimes they're metal, dark painted metal. That important, but as on the bay windows, it doesn't.
No, I mean, it goes with
Sometimes under windows, off panel, small thing, that, but as a, when it becomes a big element, it just doesn't.
Have to speak to the record, guys.
I'll ask a question. Okay.
So my understanding is all the exhibits that we had, the most recent exhibits from November, be they from the architect or from Langen Engineering, those are the exhibits that are attached to this resolution and by reference should be what we agreed to. I mean, that's as I understood it.
Yeah,
That's
Right.
our understanding as well.
that's mine.
So I don't think we made any changes except what you had referenced about the battens subsequent to looking at this
Right.
plan.
Actually, we agreed we weren't going to have the metal panels on the bay windows as a modification to the plan.
Mr. Trotner, are you looking at a transcript?
I mean, I'm just, when this, in preparing for tonight, in terms of this particular issue, I looked, the only place I could find the Hardy Board discussion as having taken place was on the March hearing, and I apologize, I forget the date.
What year was that?
2018.
Yeah.
But there was an extensive discussion of the Hardy Board and the metal panels. It did discuss some of the bay windows. The Hardy Board in particular, what the takeaway
Well, why don't you,
I had from it was
but the Hardy Board isn't visible because it's behind the building.
well, not entirely. There might be some of it visible. My problem is, and I've said this before, that on these plans, it's great we have stuff labeled, but we really can't get a realistic picture of what the finished product looks like. And it always looks different. Sometimes that's not bad. I'm not saying that it's always bad, but it always looks different because we're looking at a two-dimensional pen and ink drawing of it, as opposed to real-life materials that have different textures, that have different color variations, that reflect light differently. So,
So, Mr.
when
Chair- I'm sorry, go ahead.
in looking at this and understanding that issue and with that concern, part of my thought process in making the resolution was that these materials and these finishes and how things would be put together on the outside wasn't set in stone by what's on the site
supposed to go
plan.
revisions.
Because the revisions committee had final approval over
That was what I
the
thought.
finishes
That was what.
that would be on the building.
And we're okay with that, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that I was arguing about was, to the extent that we're arguing, was I didn't want to put language in that said we are expressly prohibited.
But
from
I don't
doing-
want, I don't want the removal of that language to be brought up at a later date as evidence that we couldn't decide that it wasn't appropriate in a certain spot, because we explicitly out the language that said that the material was prohibited. And you know how those arguments function.
So I guess what I would say is two things. One, there's a pretty good record of what everybody is thinking right now, just by virtue of this happening in a public
So
hearing.
why don't
And
we-
then two, the other thing I would say is, Mr. Chairman, is that it does say that when we go to the revisions committee, that it's subject to the review and approval.
So why don't we replace that language with the revisions committee has final say over the materials?
I think that would be, because that's what I'm.
That's what I'd say at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it says that many times.
And just as long as we make it clear,
Right.
you know, that they have final say, and that if the revision committee doesn't approve the material, then,
So
you-
are you replacing that last second sentence in 20? The furthermore, no metal, with the new requirement that the final materials?
Well, I think there was earlier language that said unless waived by the planning board revisions committee.
right.
Shall be
So we'll
reviewed and
take that,
approved.
take the furthermore out.
Stop.
And put that exception,
Okay.
put that
You can't let
exception.
everyone-
Respectfully, now you're making a statement and saying it has to be removed.
Well, hold on.
No.
What are we saying? Hold on.
We're
yeah.
going to take the, I believe we're suggesting to take the furthermore no metal language
Comes
out.
out.
Oh,
And so that
okay.
Yeah.
20 will read, the architecture and facade materials will be completed,
Reviewed and approved.
will be reviewed and approved by the planning board.
Revisions committee.
Revisions
All right,
committee.
all right, we
That's
just
the
stop
first
there.
sentence.
Yeah,
All right.
I think it's fine.
And that'll be 20.
Okay.
And we're not going to reference back to what was testified and what the plans show. All right? And then, that doesn't interfere necessarily with 19, so that can remain as it stands if battens are come into consideration.
Right.
And what was the other one, 24?
24.
It says all materials to be reviewed and approved. Which also submit samples of the building materials and finishes to the planning board. Okay.
Including, I'm going to add including exterior finishes.
Okay, including exterior finishes.
What number was that we're adding to? What
Excuse
number
me?
was that? What number was that?
24.
24.
All right. Martin?
That's it for the particular edits from the body. I think we're now on to Mr. Troutner's proposed edits, unless somebody else had some other points.
That weren't reflected in version 7 that was circulated.
Mine are all taken in, thank you.
I had many reports throughout the draft, many comments throughout the drafting, but looking at draft 7, I'm not sure why you added exhibits A and B.
Oh,
I don't think that's necessary.
we can
Yeah,
easily take it
take
out.
the, don't, I mean.
But I want you to understand my logic.
Yeah.
You said, why would you include this when you wouldn't include all these other
That's all up,
documents?
yeah.
The reason for that is I wasn't getting a straight answer as to the math. You were,
Oh.
some people were asking for numbers in certain places,
Right, okay.
and I don't have the skill to figure out what's the number. I just thought it was safe to add the chart so that people could find it if it was important.
Yeah, it just elevates those charts among all the other documents that we've been looking at, and I
Not-
don't see
not in
why
my
that would be
opinion, but
necessary.
you know, I understand where you're coming from.
Yep.
So I have no problem with taking that out.
If that's.
It was just, and after a while, we got some numbers.
Mr. Chairman, I believe, moving on to Mr. Troutner's proposed edits.
I did have one additional question on the, I don't know if Ms. Lockman was done.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, item 64. It's on page 25 of the version I have, but it's a red line I created, so. It says the board found that no public monies are being used in this project and that the applicant's proposal does not have any restrictions and no obligation to obtain SHPO approval.
The State Historic Preservation Organization.
So if I just took that little piece in the middle out of context, that's what gives me a little bit of concern and says the applicant's proposal does not have any restrictions.
As a historic structure.
Then I would be comfortable if you added that in.
What does that mean?
Because there was some language saying pertaining to removal, modification, or relocation of historic structures, and that was struck at some point. So as long as we tie it to the historic structures,
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Sorry, sometimes.
That's okay. I just didn't want it to sound like there were absolutely no restrictions
Same
whatsoever.
thing like I got SHPO there, I really should have spelled it out because,
Yeah.
you know. you might have
Yes,
to-
definitely spell it.
Oh, you want to add that?
So you'll
add
take
that
care of
in.
that
You'll
also.
you'll spell out SHPO.
Right.
I do have one more. If I may, are you done? Keith?
How's that going to read before you leave it?
Okay.
Just, how is that number going to read, number 64?
I'm gonna, after the word restrictions on the third line, as an historic structure. No restrictions because of its historic structure, because of its nature as a historic structure. It reflects the research I did. There was they have the right to, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but they have the right to
Why do we
demolish
need
it.
that? Why can't we
Well,
just?
I'm talking that general direction. I mean, should it be like that? I don't know if I agree with that philosophically, but that's
Why
what it
can't
is.
we just say the board found that no public monies are being used in this project and does not have
And it's not obligated
obligation to obtain
SHPO
SHPO
Yeah,
approval?
that's clear. I think
don't
that's
think we
better.
need the rest of that.
Okay,
That works for
that's
me.
awesome. I'll take out restrictions and,
No obligation.
Does not have any restrictions.
The board found that no public monies are being
Does
used
not
in
have
this
any-
project.
Does not
and
have any obligation.
Has no obligation to obtain SHPO approval.
so the deleted letters are restrictions and no.
Yeah. Right.
I'll still spell out chip.
Yes.
So, referring to page 20, number 46, I know I had offered language that you have included here as kind of a compromise position on the fact that you're only highlighting 6 people or so, when at the public meeting, many, many people spoke, and the
Well-
majority of people spoke against the plan. So I feel like it's really kind of misleading not to include some reference to the fact that
Is that it, isn't it?
it's no, he pulled out just as, people who had positive comments, I think you pulled out,
Because,
because we're approving the resolution. But
Exactly.
nonetheless, you're kind of giving a picture of what went on during this 18 months of hearing, and there was lots of people who came to every meeting and who had significant opposition positions on what was going on, and that is not reflected anywhere in this resolution.
we have a TV record, and we have, if somebody were to take us to court, they're going to bring up all those comments from the public. Doesn't need to be in my resolution, so it's saying it twice.
Well, it's actually our resolution, and...
Oh, did I say mine?
Yes, you did.
Well, I'm
And
going to have to defend
I
it.
don't, I mean, I don't know what my colleagues feel about this, but I think it's
What do
only
you think?
fair that the comments of the public at least be given some acknowledgement in this resolution, other than the 6 people who kind of agreed with the plan.
I wouldn't characterize the comments here as them agreeing with the plan.
What page are we on?
what I was trying to
46B, page about 20. Yeah, I think it is kind of neutral. I mean, it talks,
Where are we?
Yes, it's neutral, and that's the problem. There wasn't a neutral
page?
That's what I'm
presentation.
trying to get. What is the
Page
number?
20, number 46.
And the board's not supposed to vote any case based on how the public feels. The board's supposed to base
I think
the
it's-
case. It's supposed to base your decision on the applying the facts to the law of a case. You could have a room full of people that are opposed to something, and still the right thing to do is to approve it.
I believe the right thing to do is acknowledge in this resolution that there was a lot of opposition to this plan when the public spoke, and that is what you're discussing here in the meeting of January 28th.
Motion to
Enough
add
said.
in some additional comment, additional lines that members of the public opposed, many members of the public opposed the plan.
Actually, this is not a document that's subject to a motion like that, particularly from individuals who aren't allowed to vote on it, aren't. So it's not a proper protocol procedure. I think we can add, and I'm willing to add a reference in here, if it will make you feel better, that that the public, not all of the public, was in favor of the plan. In terms of what we have to base our decision on, our attorney's correct. And it's not the public, portion of the meeting that gives us evidence that we can base an opinion or a decision on an application.
It would make me feel better, as you seem to want to make me feel better, to say many members of the public spoke in opposition to the plan. And that's a
We can add
fact,
that.
and I think it's fair.
Okay.
But I just didn't feel comfortable changing it through this process. It's your call.
Right, so we'll add a line that says, many members of the public appeared during the public comment portion and expressed opposition to the plan. Does that,
That's a little
that's what-
because you're talking.
that's what goes on that's what happened on that meeting?
Yeah, if you just added a D, and just said many members of the
Right,
public
I
spoke
meant
in
to
opposition.
add this as a D.
Okay.
But we're not clarifying A, B, or C as support
No.
or
It just-
not, because
no, it's
two
just a
of the three
recitation of what
seem
happened.
more in line with those that were less supportive. So I don't know if we want to make a call on support versus folks that are not in support, because A, B, and C are not necessarily in support.
Well, A
They're
is.
not in support.
A is, B and B is more
Only for
It's
groceries.
neutral, but that wasn't really neutral when they spoke.
right, and
And then-
C is, and I just don't know if we want to put any color about whether the comments were made in support or.
So you're
Because
saying
we'll get- no,
in A-
the only reason I
add-
say this is if we add a D saying many members spoke out against the plan, that's a declarative statement in opposition where we don't have explicitly supportive statements.
So
but-
should we add a statement that says members of the public both spoke in opposition and support of?
Because
think
A
that's
is
true.
saying supported the idea of a grocery store on site, it's not saying they supported the plan, although the
Right.
plan includes it.
Right.
So each of these, and so to add one that is explicitly people spoke in opposition just seemed a bit odd.
Okay.
Purely
So if
odd.
we-
I'm not saying
if we
it-
say
yeah.
that If we say that we had both,
Yes.
I like that.
That's right, because it's true.
then let's phrase it that way.
Members of the public spoke both for and against the project,
Right.
and that'll become D.
And are you leaving A, B, and C in there?
Yes.
Oh, you are? Mm.
Okay, so, Mr. Troutman, with respect to the comments that we got back on pages 30 through 33, I'll run through them. Members of the board chime in as appropriate. The change suggested for number 28, I'm okay with.
I have to find it.
This is on that
Yeah, I
was
just had it.
in front of
I printed
everybody.
it, but I don't.
Yeah.
Number 28?
Didn't
Number
you have
28.
some
Correct.
refined language for that?
Mr. Troutman.
Not number 28. Well, yeah, actually, after we discussed that and
Incidental? I think.
incidental, exception of incidental laboratory uses.
Yeah.
Incidentals. good.
I thought that was reasonable, too. So we're not going to get a quest or LabCorp, but
Right.
the doctor goes through something in Petri dish, tell you what you got.
Right. Right. I think that's the intent.
Many of the offices just serve the clientele who are a part of
The practice.
the practice. They're not open to the public to bring in lab work. So
Right.
that's-
Right, and that's why we
That's
wanted to make
covered
it
in
clear.
this, yeah.
And the other thing is, that would have a different parking requirement too, because it's a different kind of
Right,
operation.
right,
It's kind of retail.
Mm-hmm.
But that ordinary stuff can be done at the site.
Right.
Well, that was good. Let's do the next one.
35A, I'm not so happy with.
No.
Yeah, I'd like to know your thinking on taking that out.
I'm not really interested in this thinking.
No,
I don't
but I
think we
mean-
should-
No.
We should
No.
just
That's the-
not
No.
include
All
it.
I mean, that seems the gist of
Okay.
Oh, so are we talking about, I'm sorry, we're talking about the protection of site historic structures
Correct.
section?
Yeah.
So, well, I know you're not interested in my thinking, but
It's disconcerting.
what I was trying to figure out, what I was trying to solve for was, the applicant is committed to protect the waiting room, fine. Applicant's committed to protecting the western terminus shed, fine. Applicant is committed to protecting the fountain. And then I started to have this moment of, well, wait, we're going to move the fountain might get, we're going to add a water feature, we're reconstructing it, what does that mean? You know, and then when we hit the platform canopies, I thought to myself, well, wait, the stanchions are already extensively covered in here. What does it mean that we're agreeing to protect the platform canopies? Because we had extensive testimony about, well, we're not really preserving the concrete that runs along the top that makes them platform canopies. Instead, what we're agreeing to do is preserve a certain number of stanchions that are identified on the site plan in the way that they're identified on the site plan. And then there's further language about how we're going to go to the revisions committee about attempting to reintroduce into the site I think it's the 16 stanchions that aren't on the site plan. But then I thought that this became confusing in the sense of what we're committed to protecting the platform canopies. What does that mean?
Well-
So I thought the easiest thing to do was to take it out because I thought it was redundant.
No, I had this vetted by our historic preservation consultant and other prior HPC individuals, and this was the language that they had come up with based on the review of the site. So I'd like to leave all this in here. It's not an encumbrance. It has been in for approximately 2 months, trying to change this at the 11th.
Well, no, Mr. Schwartz, I sent comments to this resolution going back into March.
I'm not advancing them.
Okay.
They're in your conditions. I told him he'd have a chance to come here. So to be truthful, it's not that you didn't get something, it's that I kind of...
Okay, I mean, this is like 11th hour. Our HPC consultant is not here.
I think we've already said that.
Yeah.
Right.
We agree that we want this language. Yeah.
Right. And the same for the taking out insurers to
Yeah.
just a goal. We're not sort of, oops is not something we're kind
Right,
of
right.
in the spirit of. So.
I think the next,
Can I, just coming back to the platform canopy, so what is the understanding of protect the platform canopies mean in light of?
It means that you're going to provide a historic element treatment plan, your client is, and it's going to be reviewed by the revision committee prior to the issuance of the building demolition
Okay.
permit.
Then we'll know.
Now that we've said that out loud, I'm okay.
Well, that's the second part of the paragraph.
Right.
Well, I'm okay with that. What I didn't want to have happen was 6 months from now, somebody says, you can't actually even do this site plan because of what's there.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to do that.
so these next two should, these two should just stay.
So 35, we're not going to edit at all.
Right.
35 should not be edited, nor should be, none of this should be touched.
I think that's what we just said.
Yeah.
And then with that, we're done. So
Well, wait,
someone like
actually,
me-
if I can, so just jumping to B, preservation of metal stanchions for parking lot. So I proposed deleting some language here. The applicants, to keep it to say, the applicants agree to submit their final plans for removal and replacement of exterior stanchions, not otherwise documented on the existing site plan, to the Planning Board of Revisions Committee for review and approval. I had removed language regarding maintaining the beam structures above the stanchions. We didn't agree to maintain that concrete going across.
No,
the-
it's not the concrete, the steel beams.
You mean the crossbar
In other
of
words,
of the T?
Yeah, we have gone through this in a couple of places. You're either going to keep the steel that's there, reuse it. I'm not talking about the stanchions themselves. The beams above.
But doesn't Mr. Ross's memo indicate that we have to keep the platform canopies to run the concrete across the top? I mean, in other words, not just the T, I mean, like the actual canopy, the way it looks in historic photos. I mean, I'm pretty sure he says that in his.
If I can jump in, I think you need to define what platform canopies are.
It's right on our plan, and
It's
frankly,
on
the
the-
steel you're referring to was added in the 1980s. And we specifically said in the hearings that we would keep the original platform stanchions that are there, but not the steel that the developer added.
Do you remember Mr. Ross came up with an alternative plan, not alternative?
I do remember, I just.
Of potential
Right,
beams
but
going
my
across?
point is, I don't agree to language that says we agreed to that. We didn't. And I have no problem with the idea of whatever the final plan is, it's going to have to get reviewed by the revisions committee and approved by it. But what I'm concerned about is when we show up at the revisions committee, somebody says, well, no, you already agreed to everything Mr. Ross proposed.
In other words, he proposed an option of visually linking the stanchions with some additional beams across. And they would be either the existing steel that's there or new metal brought in because you're modifying the spacing of those stanchions. And that was, we were going to kick that down the line to determine in the revisions committee whether or not that particular treatment of having the steel at the top, linking the stanchions, or not doing it was visually more attractive. This was really an aesthetic.
I don't disagree that it was discussed that we would come back and discuss it with the revisions committee. I'm just concerned about the words. Also, the applicants have agreed to adhere, which then seems to take that discretion away from the revisions committee and say it's already decided.
That's in what's crossed out.
That's what was,
at the
yeah.
In B.
bottom. BI.
Oh, over here.
Agree to adhere.
So, you want to keep the first part of that?
Agree to
and
consider?
Go up to also?
So why don't we, or let me suggest that we amend that to read, the applicant agrees to submit their final plans for the removal, replacement, or relocation of exterior stanchions and associated structures, not otherwise denoted on the site plan, to the planning board, revisions committee for their review and approval,
Right.
period.
So that takes care of the language aspect of this, but let's just clarify what we're really, I want to clarify this now because it can affect the language. We're talking about his proposal, I don't remember the letter, of this original steel that connected without the concrete, that served as a visual beam across at the top. And whether or not, and his proposal was to keep that gave it a flavor of maintaining more of the line of the beams and the line of the tracks that were once there. It's not
Actually, the line of the canopy.
line of the canopies. It's not clear whether that's really going to work until we, see it a little more played out and
Because we don't know what's there.
All to be discussed with the revisions committee.
and how thick that steel should be, whether the original steel's going to work or some newer element, just to give a hint of it, given it could be onerous. It could be visually onerous and look unattractive. To be determined, right? As long, we're agreeing.
We're on the
with
same
that?
page.
Okay.
Can I go back to, I guess it's II. You're talking about
At 35,
35,
II, 2.
You're putting in light of their potential. Can you get rid of potential because it will be in proximity to heavy equipment?
I think we said we were not going to accept any of the proposed revisions for
Right,
35.
we're gonna go with
Okay.
the original
So
language.
we're back to
Alright.
the original language.
Oh, okay. Good.
Dennis, can you,
And-
just to clarify, could you read what, I guess it's B, little I is now reading to say?
I have the applicants agreed to submit their final plans for removal, replacement, or relocations of exterior stanchions, including the addition of and/or maintaining the beam structures above the stanchions in the parking lot to the Planning Board Revisions Committee for its review and approval. And then I deleted also, everything following also.
Yeah, I think Mr. Nguyen, Chair Nguyen, had different language.
Yes.
I just said an associated,
That's right.
an associated structure.
You got rid of including the addition of and/or maintaining the beam
Right,
structure,
right.
yeah.
Mhm.
I add relocation,
Of
removal,
Sorry about
replacement,
that.
and relocation of exterior stanchions and associated structures,
And associated structures. Okay, got it.
To the Planning Board Revisions Committee.
so that we had,
Good there.
because we don't know what's there
Right.
exactly, so we want to be able to address
To
what
the-
we,
I
what we
got it.
can, what we uncover.
But are we still okay with deleting from also?
Still okay with what?
Deleting
In the
from
second
also?
sentence? Yeah.
Deleting.
I
Yes.
think so.
Yeah.
All right? Thank you. Sorry about that.
And, same thing, I don't want to change C-double-I below. And that was the extent of the changes that I received from you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a couple others, but I don't need to go first if other people on the board have things they want to discuss with
No,
you.
but let's hear what you got.
Sure. So, it initially shows up, I have it on page 7, although you might have it at a different page. It's the meeting of May 14th, number 12C. It talks about, based on the sworn and qualified testimony of applicant's engineer Kevin Webb of Langen Engineering. And then I think there's is there a global change that's going to happen in terms of the board made the following findings of fact? I may have an older version in front of me, but anyway, long story short, subsection C, it used to say trucks will not be permitted to turn left on Glenridge Avenue when exiting the loading area. At some point, the language evolved to say all vehicles, including tractor trailers, will not be permitted to turn left on Glenridge Avenue. I'm raising this in the sense of, I think when we talked about it at the hearing, we talked about trucks, and I'm not trying to be persnickety in the sense of like if the applicant has any idea that there's going to be other vehicles, but it is a shared easement area with a neighboring property, so I'm slightly just concerned that we're adding something that was never really discussed, and it may impact others beyond just the applicant.
So
I'm
you're
okay with
saying-
cars making left turns.
Yeah,
'cause
so
I
it's
think
just-
everybody-
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
I
think
added
it
that,
coming out
vehicles,
of
because
lab court.
cars are okay, but I didn't want trucks or trailers or any
Right.
big
Trucks, trailers,
commercial
truck, we agree.
vehicle.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
commercial
say-
vehicles.
Right,
Commercial
commercial
vehicles.
vehicles, we could change it to that. But
just
then
say-
how are you going to have a sign there? I mean, you can say no left turns or
Commercial.
commercial
Commercial,
vehicles?
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so then, and then that same issue, it actually shows up in the conditions of approval. I believe it's condition number 12. So I guess if we can make the same change there. I have it page 28, although I couldn't. An older draft.
Yeah, I see.
Saved it.
Added that. 12,
12 under the conditions?
28,
Right.
page
Yeah,
28,
change it to
12.
Yeah, I
Commercial.
think change it so it's consistent.
Yep.
Then I have condition number 21. I think it's on the same page. So this condition talks about the board's agreement to grant the parking variance and to permit the elimination, relocation of certain historic elements in the building is contingent upon the applicants providing a supermarket that'll serve the community. And then, and it talks about the idea that if the site abandons.
What number, sir?
I'm sorry,
21, page 29,
And
number
then if the
21.
site abandons the supermarket use, the right to the parking variance will cease.
Right.
We're okay with all of these conceptual, more than conceptual, with these conditions of approval in terms of we lose the variance if we abandon the supermarket use, and that we're agreeing to preserve the untouched historic features of the site. What we wanted to take out was the agreement to record a deed restriction, and I don't know if the board recalls, there was actually a specific discussion on this before the board's vote. It had been suggested by Mr. Galvin to have us record a deed restriction, and I had made the point that if a deed restriction is put into place, then in the future, if there's any desire to change anything, the board actually is divested of jurisdiction and has to go to Superior Court to be dealt with. So my suggestion was, instead of a deed restriction, that these these conditions stay in as conditions, and that we instead put in a condition that requires us to record the resolution of approval with the condition, so that the board's concerned, I think, that a future property owner can't show up and say, oh, no, I didn't know anything about that. And that requirement to record the resolution actually does make it into the resolution as a condition. I have it now as condition number 35. So what I would propose is just on 21 to take out the language regarding where the applicants agree to record the deed restriction, and I can hand up a markup I have that where it just basically we strike out a couple words.
I think we reversed ourselves on that to make it more onerous for compliance. And that doesn't mean that you wouldn't come before the board to seek relief, but
I think you'd say, based on the law, it does. I seem to remember this discussion.
Yeah, I remember this
By going
discussion
down to
too.
the
Yeah.
conclusion, I
And
think-
the whole purpose of the deed restriction was to put potential property owners, subsequent property owners on notice.
right.
And recording the resolution does
Does the
this
same thing.
without having to involve the court, which,
Right, based on the American Dream case, they'd have to go to council, get the council to change or relieve the deed restriction.
yeah, and I don't think that was our intention.
You're saying that
Per
the
se.
power of having the resolution somewhere along with it, I'm not quite sure how that works.
The resolution would get recorded basically in the same place where the deed gets recorded, so that anybody checking the title, like a title company, which you have to have when they want to sell it,
They're on notice.
would pull the resolution as a part of pulling the prior title. So they would have notice that in the resolution that there are conditions that
But
affect
what I don't
the property.
get is that the resolution has the same power in court as the deed restriction.
Well,
It is enforceable. The resolution is enforceable. It's a different mechanism for enforcement. And the difference is that doing a deed restriction makes it harder for the property owner to disregard it or change it if it had to be changed in the future. But the fact that it's only a resolution doesn't make it any less enforceable.
Supposing.
But the town could go and enforce the resolution and block any activity with the property.
The town
that
would have to go to
doesn't-
court to do that, so to
doesn't-
speak?
The town would have to go to court to
That
block.
sounds a little
Yeah, that puts the
difficult.
onus on us.
Well, no. What I would argue is the condition of the resolution runs with the land. So whether it's us or it's a future property owner, that the building department, actually, I would argue, they don't actually, you might end up in court at some point, but as an initial matter, the building department can enforce it.
Wouldn't issue a.
Yeah.
The initiative would have to come from the town in order to
Well,
enforce it.
Well, not exactly. The property owner would want to do something that would require the town's approval.
The general problem is we don't record our resolutions. When somebody buys a property, like a single-family homeowner, since there's nothing in the chain of title, they don't know about some condition that the prior owner promised. So there are cases that say the only way to hold these restrictions and promises that people make in these hearings is for you to have those things recorded. What the chairman is saying correctly is whether we record the resolution or we record a deed restriction, we're in the same place. We have our conditions are in the record, and then future owners are on notice.
Well, but supposing the current owner or owners, or if the property's sold, and the new owners are not compliant with the terms of the resolution, what's the enforcement mechanism?
Code enforcer would go out and enforce it.
But they don't get a building permit.
Or you could
Well,
pull
you
the,
got
I
a
think you might be able to
building
pull the
permit.
CO.
Supposing they no longer provide a supermarket, is the town going to now come in and say, oh, you don't have a CO anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, they gotta
Yes,
come back to the
exactly.
board.
You just lost your parking, you have no CO?
Right. You can't operate as a business.
I mean,
And
they'll have a
what I would
different-
argue is the town's enforcement rights are no different, whether it's a deed restriction or whether it's just a recorded condition of a resolution of approval. The fundamental difference is if it's a restriction, the applicant can't go to the planning board to discuss it. The planning board's divested of jurisdiction. If it's a condition of, just a condition of approval, you can come back to the planning board and maybe try and get your CO back.
Yeah. It makes it easier for the owner of the property in that respect. It doesn't make it harder for the town. Because either way, in order for the town to do anything, if the property owner says, is to go to court. Yeah, we can take away their, CO, we can, but in order to physically stop them, we'd have to have the code enforcement capacity to do that. I don't know whether we've ever mobilized the police to do something like that.
No,
You
but
issue a violation.
we
and they go to-
basically pull them into court for violations and
court for
fine them up the wazoo.
It's like $2,000 a day, I think. So,
Yeah, we have our, we've done
it's-
this before.
What
Or,
about,
sorry, go ahead.
what about the impact on third parties, neighbors, businesses? How would that play out? Just
What do
like-
you mean?
In other words, let's say they weren't adhering to the resolution.
Could a third party make a complaint?
How would a third party handle that legally?
They go to the zoning officer and they complain.
Make a
If the
complaint.
zoning officer refuses to do their job,
Right.
anybody can go to court and enforce our document.
So
If
someone
you've promised something to the public,
Yeah.
you would expect that the enforcement department, I don't know anybody in Montclair, so I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. But in other towns, if it doesn't happen, then the first hope would be the zoning department would take action and issue a violation. If they don't, I could go to court and go in for what's called a writ of mandamus to have a zoning officer do their job.
So they have to compel the town to perform, to enforce.
And I would probably also include the developer as you have a public right, it's in a thing, they should be doing the right thing, and other issues, maybe nuisance, something.
And if it was a deed restriction and not a,
The key thing is having something recorded under Mintz versus Millstone, which is when there's no recorded document, even if there's a good argument, sometimes people get away with
the
changing
writ of
things.
mandamus is based on the recorded document, whatever that document is.
Well, no, it would be, that my term for using the writ of mandamus is to get a government official to do their job.
What if it's a deed restriction?
The deed restriction and the recording resolution have the same impact, in my opinion, in this case. Both of them will arm the
No,
zoning
but
official.
what if there's a deed restriction and the town doesn't do anything? Can a private citizen,
I think both,
My answer is yes.
both recorded documents would give them the.
that's what I.
He's saying yes now, but you might have to say no later.
No.
So he does it.
Actually, under the American Dream case and at Sousa v. Denville, it talks about the deed restriction creates rights.
Private right of action.
Well, it defers
Well,
it defers to
it's not
beneficiaries.
private
The
of
public has,
It's
the
a
public
public-
has a
Right,
right.
that's it, yeah.
To see that they get the benefit of these resolutions. That's what I hear all the time.
Are we
So
saying that
you're clear?
whenever anybody gets a deed, they're gonna get this along with it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, when they get it's part of the public record. So how it works is that if somebody goes to buy that property, they're gonna get title insurance, okay? Nobody's gonna buy
Right.
that property without title insurance. Title company, when the title company sees that, they're gonna report that in the title report that this is recorded and this is an easement, not an easement, this is a legal right that impacts the use of that property.
Right. it's
So
gonna be-
that's how they'll see it. They'll see it in the title report, because that's where you see a copy of your deed. There'll be a copy of it attached to it, but that's basically the mechanism that people see.
Or
You
filing.
could go down to the county and pull it yourself, but normally speaking,
And if
in
I
real
did pull
estate
it myself, it would
transactions,
still be there.
Huh?
If I did pull it myself, it would still be there.
you
Yeah.
pull a copy.
Yeah.
You can't pull the original. You can only get a copy.
No, wait.
So, it's,
All right.
all right?
Yeah.
So that
There's one other issue.
Actually, I'm sorry,
So-
Mr. Chairman, I could come back to it, I just had two more.
So we're okay with not having a deed restriction under 21, but just recording it with the deed?
I think that's fine.
I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure the board is
Yeah.
comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
I really don't know. I'm just kind of abstaining because I don't understand it as well as I should.
Well, again, just for clarification, it's no difference in the town's right or the public's right, whether it's one or the other. The difference is if the applicant wants to do something the mechanism that they would have to take or use in order to do something, whether they would have to go to the court or whether they would have to come to us.
Okay, they come to us.
And
And
with
they-
with a
Right.
resolution, recorded resolution, that would force them to us.
Okay. Think I got it. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Two more, let's go.
All right, so number 29.
3 more.
Okay.
29, the applicant shall dedicate at least 2 parking spaces to fast charge electric charging stations. I think the language was, I can't remember if it was I suggested or it was there before, maybe it wasn't, I just suggested it, but the applicant, what I wanted to change to say was the applicant shall be permitted to dedicate at least 2 parking spaces to fast charge electric charging stations. There was discussion of this on the February 11th before the vote, and when this came up, the discussion was about, basically you were helping us by saying we didn't need to come back with an amended site plan approval or seek further approval to do the fast charge electric charging stations, that we could do at least 2. So I just wanted to say that we're permitted to, rather than the way this is written is now we're doing it, which was not what was in the discussion.
So what's
Shall
the
be
verb?
permitted?
So
They want the
applicants-
option, but they don't want to be, way it's written
So
here,
you're-
they're required.
I thought that you said you would do it.
That's what I remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought the 2 is just saying, we're not saying more than 2, but we are saying 2 is a reasonable
Yeah.
number given the size of this
I thought
plan.
that's
But
in the
should we say you
master plan.
you shall dedicate at least 2 and be permitted to install more?
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
All right, and then the last one maybe, I don't know if somebody else was going to bring this up, but it was I have it as new condition number 34.
Yes,
yeah,
that
it's a-
was what I wanted to.
Okay, all right, so Mr. Chairman,
Well,
I'll
I
let
did
you
get
go.
some, I think I got some language from you.
Yes.
And 34 was a source of confusion because it was dealing with the creation of new easements in addition to an existing easement. And so the applicant had proposed, instead of what was on the draft, last draft, that it should read, the applicant shall record an easement to memorialize that tenants of the residential building and current employees of businesses on the site shall have access to the pedestrian tunnel under Grove Street. And the form of easement shall be reviewed and approved prior to recording. The only thing that I would add to that is that there should also be a parking easement.
No.
A cross parking easement.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Because,
We're forcing people to that law.
right, we don't want, if you're gonna sell if the properties get split, we wanna make sure that because that's the way that we're approving the parking of the site.
We're okay with that.
Okay. So, Mr. Galvin, are you good with that change?
Can you just read it again?
The applicant shall record an easement to memorialize that tenants of the residential building and the current employees of the businesses on the site shall have access to the pedestrian tunnel under Grove Street. And there has to be an additional requirement that the applicant will create cross easements between the 2 parcels for the purposes of parking.
I think I would take out current employees, just employees, take out the word current.
Yeah.
Of employees, okay.
Yeah.
And that form of easements shall be reviewed and approved prior to recording by the board's chairman. Right?
I'm good, yes.
I'm good with that.
Should be.
Okay. And that was,
Does that capture everybody, just by saying employees?
I think so,
You think so?
because that's what was
Yeah, I know, that's
employees
what I-
and-
These are employees. I thought about that, the
Right.
valet people, but they're not
Yeah,
employees.
but the valet
But
people,
they're,
you
they're
know,
employees though, so.
they're employees of
Yeah.
somebody, but not of the tenants,
No, they're
the management. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. You're the attorney, you draft the language. But
What's
I just
that?
want to make sure just saying employees encompasses anybody who's allowed to use the pedestrian.
No, employees of the businesses.
So
Employees of the
individuals
business.
But
employed
Park
by
is a business,
businesses.
So the valet people are using it as well, right?
Yeah.
Businesses on the site.
Well,
Pro Park isn't really a business on
So
the
that the-
site.
the-
It's operating, it's managing the parking,
Right,
but it's.
Presumably because they're using the garage underneath to park cars, that they're gonna come through and come out the tunnel as well, right?
Right.
Right.
So that Pro Park is included in that, I I thought employees included anybody who worked, whether they're pro-park or whether they're working in the restaurant or working in the
Right.
retail.
I think what we could, a good point, Carol, I think we could say for employees, for any of the businesses on the site, or for any businesses that are working, or involved in the management of the site. Because, for example, a landscaper or somebody, something could happen one day. It's a very good point.
And it's access for the employees whose cars are parked on that
The,
site.
the main goal is to make sure that if the two properties separate, that there still be this,
Yeah.
that we're not
Connection.
messing up the plan.
Right. We agree with that.
And shall record an easement
Okay.
is not granting them additional ability to do something different than.
Shall means must. It's a-
Right.
It's a
It's just
direction.
this whole piece around the easement has always been a question since the first meeting that we had, so I just want to make sure.
What are we
that-
talking about? You
I
talking
think
about the
that's-
tunnel?
I think,
Right, the
Mr. Gilman,
tunnel.
you're referring to a different easement.
So
This
the
is going to be
tunnel-
a new easement.
Right. The tunnel easement, we're not doing anything to that.
Right.
It's reflected in the filed map. That's sufficient legally to establish that easement. That's there, and we don't have to do anything to that, because that
Right,
would
okay.
also
Good, good,
involve
good.
doing anything to reassert that or to reaffirm it would require involving the council also.
Yes.
But
And,
we're
yeah,
cre-
separate from this
Right.
item here, yeah.
We're creating these two easements in part to support that easement, the use of that easement for the properties, and to also support the parking
The way the
management.
plan
And-
was explained to us, that
Yes.
the only people using that tunnel are the tenants going to the stores and the employees coming across.
Right.
When they're not supposed to park their car in the other lot, take up spots.
And whether or not employees park there, you know, we want the tenants in the building to be able to use it to manage that traffic from the building.
Right, and if anything, it's clarifying pedestrian access.
Yes,
Right,
for the residents,
right.
for the
For
residents.
people outside the
They're
building.
pedestrians.
No, no, not, yeah,
Right,
not
they're
outside,
pedestrians,
right.
they're not public,
Right, no,
but they are
people might-
pedestrians if they're walking to the.
I know, but people might misunderstand. It's
Right.
not a public way.
Right, and we talked about it a couple times just now. Where did we land? Did we say persons employed by companies on site? By
It's-
businesses on site?
The
And I think, and those.
businesses on site,
And those involved in the management of the property,
Yes.
right.
management or maintenance.
Okay, great.
And that was it.
You want me to read it all back?
Yes.
No, we
whole
can't.
We ain't kidding.
So that's the
Entirely.
resolution as amended.
Motion time.
Move to approve.
Second,
Wait, who made the motion?
Chairman
Me.
did.
Chairman Nguyen.
Vice Chairman made the second.
And I guess I should do a roll call. All right.
But we still haven't seen it all in writing, so it's gonna be written up, right?
Yes. He has to.
Voting
Yes,
on it
and more.
without seeing the actual
He has to
written.
memorialize the changes that we've offered. We've reviewed the language, and we'll make sure that the language.
But it would be helpful just to clarify the process here briefly.
Yeah.
Yes, so we vote, right, so we vote on it now, changes are made, and,
We'll review the language.
Tomorrow, if you find I made a mistake, you tell me, and I'll fix it. It'll be exactly what we discussed tonight. No
And
changes.
Mr. Troutner looks at it as well.
Except I was going to put that the parties voting against the application are going to contribute $5,000 to the Children's Fund, you know?
I think I should get paid for all my editing.
Right.
I counted how many edits I had. You don't want to hear the number.
That's-
Okay. So, Chair Nguyen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brodock,
Yes.
Miss Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Rooney,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmer.
yes.
Okay. That's it.
Okay.
You did it.
Thank you, everyone.
Where you
Thank
going?
everyone for the longest hearing I think any of us have had. Thank you very
Disneyland
much.
now?
I was just saying Disneyland is the right answer.
Off to Disneyland.
All right.
One of these?
Do
Do you have another one of these? Of the May 6th?
Now,
Wait a minute.
we have
No, I don't.
Where's it?
another
Resolution.
resolution for Bel Air House
Right.
Condo Association.
That was grueling.
Motion to pass with Mr. Brodock's edits.
Wait, I had one more edit, and it's totally minor, but you need to consistently capitalize applicant.
Okay.
I must say you read well. You read every word.
Okay, so who's the motion?
Do you want to make a new motion, Mr.
Motion to
Schwartz?
pass with Mr. Broderick's edits and Carmel's edit.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay.
Okay. The application for 59 Glenridge Avenue has been carried to our June 10th meeting at the request of the applicant. And that brings us to the application for 37 Orange Road, Montclair, LLC.
You want me to talk?
Yeah.
Okay. We have a dilemma. We have a case that's been deemed complete with potential jurisdictional issues. In the case of DePietro versus Wayne, we learned that the planning board cannot make interpretations involving jurisdiction of which board hears the case. So either the council makes changes to the plan, or the applicant should go to the zoning board and request an interpretation to see what the proper density requirement is. I don't know what the zoning board will do with it. And that's the procedure.
So either way, we can't hear it
We
tonight.
we cannot grant a density variance. So unless they tell me that there's no density variance, you could hear this case, but my advice would be to decline it, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So Mr. Troutner is willing to give me a vast 90-day extension of the time in which the board has to act, and he may have to do it again. And if he doesn't do it, we will dismiss this case for failure to act. Okay? Until he gets to the zoning board and gets a decision, if he can get one that's in his favor.
So, short answer, yes, we're requesting that the application be carried, and we consent to extending the time for the board to act, and we're extending up to 90 days and may need to extend further at that point, but in the interim.
Right. Zoning board has 120 days to hear the case, and they haven't filed their request for interpretation.
So we can't establish another date, an adjourn date on
No.
this. We have to wait until the
They'll
zoning
have
board
to
acts.
renotice.
Okay.
And if they don't fix the problem, then hopefully they'll withdraw the application, but we'll see.
So they've decided to go to the zoning board, not to appeal to the council, then?
They can do either, I'm
They
not
haven't
telling them,
decided
but,
anything.
Oh, you haven't decided, Mr. Troutner, yet, what your plan is?
We've decided to adjourn.
Oh, okay.
And
The
that's
answer to that question was yes.
excellent lawyering.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trout. All right, do we have any new business that's not indicated on our agenda explicitly?
No, there's no new business since last Monday. No new bills since last Monday.
Committee reports? There's a committee meeting coming up,
We got a couple coming up.
We have a
But-
couple of meetings
Yeah.
coming
but
up,
They're very
nothing to
busy.
report.
so nothing to report since last week.
No.
So I move to that
We did have a
adjourn.
DRC meeting, but
Second.
that was fine. A Development Review Committee meeting. Right. So that was very minor. That was the only thing that happened since last Monday.
Just curious, Janice, have you seen any new applications coming down the pike that we will be hearing shortly?
I would say yes. I can answer
No,
that.
serious things.
Out comes the roll.
There's always something.
The Hampton House is coming in for a very minor,
Yeah.
Which house? I'm
Hampton
sorry.
Hampton
Hampton.
House. They're putting
I've seen it
a
twice.
minor addition on that. Property on 123 Watchung Avenue, that's a very minor project. They're putting a carport in the back. You've got two minor subdivisions, one from 1 lot to 3 lots, one from 1 lot to 2 lots. That's coming up.
They? What area of town?
Montclair.
No, what area of town?
One's over by High Street and one's over by
High Street?
High Street and Upper Mountain Avenue.
Okay.
I started out.
The
started out by-
Montclair Art Museum will be coming before you with a really nice site plan for their outside, a plaza area they're creating. And yeah, that's about it. We've got a new one that just came in on Glenridge Avenue, right next to where the parking deck is located. It's a expansion of that building there. So nothing huge. These are all minor stuff.